Sasha Samsudean made it her mission to help people find their home. Not just an address, but comfort, stability, a place they could be themselves. And the irony of that mission is hard to stomach, because in the end, the one place where Sasha should have been her safest, in her own home, became the place where her life was taken. She was 27, working in downtown Orlando, living in a modern, upscale condo complex that advertised itself as secure. Cameras, keypads, access codes, everything that looks good on a brochure. But none of it mattered the night Sasha came home alone, tipsy, a little disoriented, and trying to make it back to her unit on the 3rd floor. That Saturday started off like so many others. Drinks, dancing, a night out at the attic with friends. Around 12:30 a.m., she decided to call it and told a friend she was heading out. Surveillance footage shows her making it home. You can watch her on camera, wandering the halls, climbing the stairs, trying to find her way back to apartment 345. And following her was the man who was supposed to be keeping the building safe. Stephen Duxbury was a security guard, uniformed, on duty, and fully aware of Sasha's condition. He later told investigators he only meant to help, that he spoke briefly with 2 women who had tried to walk her home, that he followed Sasha to make sure she got to her unit. But that version of the story started to crumble fast. Police would later find search history on his phone. One search in particular: how to override a keypad lock, the exact kind Sasha had on her front door. That search happened while she was still alive, still trying to get inside. By 5 a.m., Duxbury had made his way back to her door, and by 6:30, he was caught on camera again, this time leaving the building with trash bags. Inside Sasha's apartment, the scene told a horrifying story. She'd been raped, strangled, and beaten. Her larynx was crushed, her body bruised and battered, her shirt ripped open, underwear gone, her necklace tangled in her hair. There were shoe prints, a used condom wrapper, and a strong chemical smell hanging in the air. Duxbury had tried to clean up after himself, scrub the place with bleach, make it look like nothing happened. But his fingerprints were on the toilet. His DNA was on Sasha's body, and he couldn't explain any of it. 2 days before her death, Sasha had dinner at her parents' house, her favorite meal. She FaceTimed her brother in California and showed him the plate. A moment so normal, so easy, that it's almost unbearable in hindsight. That was the last night they'd ever eat together as a family. What happened next wouldn't be discovered until Sasha missed breakfast plans the next morning. Her friends couldn't reach her. Calls went unanswered. They knocked, waited, hoped, and then called the police. Officers entered the apartment and found her wrapped in her own comforter, partially clothed, with a bottle of bleach nearby. The toilet seat still up, signaling a man had been inside, but no sign of forced entry. The lock on her door wasn't broken, it was bypassed. And who else had the power to bypass the door locks besides the resident? The security guard. And the guard on the clock that night? None other than Stephen Duxbury. Stephen Duxbury wore a uniform. He carried himself like someone in control. He claimed to be a protector. But when it mattered most, he used every bit of that trust to become a predator. He didn't just watch Sasha struggle. He watched, followed, planned, and ultimately killed. And in the end, it wasn't high-tech security that caught him. It was the things he couldn't erase. A fingerprint, a shoe print, a trail of digital searches. It was a trail that never should have been there in the first place. For the evidence room, let's take a deeper dive and follow those footsteps. It was the kind of case that leaves footprints, literal ones, digital ones, and the kind that live on in the back of your mind long after you think you've looked away. By the end of October 2015, the Orlando Police Department was deep into the task of retracing the final hours of Sasha Samsudean's life. She had been murdered just a few days earlier, inside her own apartment at Uptown Place, a high-end, camera-lined complex in downtown Orlando, Florida. Investigators began by walking the same path she had, starting from the nightclub she'd visited that night, all the way to her front door. Aided by the building's extensive CCTV system, they were able to stitch together the harrowing timeline. At around 1:46 a.m., Sasha was caught on camera returning to the complex. She wasn't alone, though. 2 women, complete strangers, were helping her. When police eventually tracked those women down, they explained they didn't know her personally. They had just seen her stumbling, drunk, confused, and decided to make sure she got home safe. She couldn't remember the building's entry code, so the women tried to get help from the security guard on duty, Stephen Duxbury. Stephen refused to let her in, citing policy. So Sasha had to tailgate behind another tenant, and in that moment, she unknowingly stepped into the orbit of a man who would soon take her life in cold blood. CCTV footage captures her inside, moving unsteadily through stairwells and hallways. At one point, she interacts briefly with the guy who had let her in. You can hear him ask her, "You okay?" "Are you okay?" She replies, "Yeah." It's the kind of small moment that, in hindsight, splits your chest right open. If that stranger had just walked her to her door, none of what followed might have happened. At 2:25 a.m., Sasha appears on camera again, this time with Stephen Duxbury. They're headed towards the garage. In the footage, you can hear him say, "I thought you were running away from me." At one point, Sasha can be seen climbing stairs rapidly, almost as if she's being chased. But then, moments later, she's walking beside him, conversing. She was still drunk, possibly panicked, maybe just trying to figure out what was happening. At 8:36 on the tape, she asks him, Where you said you live?" He answers, "You want to come with me." He'd been leading up to this, building rapport, talking about himself, pushing boundaries under the pretense of being helpful. You can hear it in the tone. He thought she'd be easy, too drunk to say no, or at least too disoriented to remember if she had. But she turned him down. And then, at 8:47, she tells him, "You know what? You're nice." She said that to the man who would murder her. We now know that after that encounter, Duxbury returned to the security desk, and at some point between 3 and 6 in the morning, he found a way into Sasha's apartment. She'd made it inside on her own, retrieved her key somehow, and locked the door. But Duxbury had been researching how to override the type of electronic lock on her unit. By around 5:13 a.m., he was inside. By 5:15 a.m., the surveillance feed cut out, staying down until 6:36 a.m. He wasn't supposed to have that kind of access. He was just a security guard, a name tag, a flashlight. But that night, he had a smartphone, and the lock on Sasha's door had a known vulnerability. In fact, the manufacturer of said door lock was later sued over it. Because what good is a lock if someone with nothing more than an internet connection can break it? At 5 a.m., Duxbury can be seen walking down the hallway towards her apartment. At 6:30, he's seen again, this time walking away from her unit, carrying trash bags. In the footage, you can see the corner of a purple-blue shirt, something white. Sasha was wearing those same colors. He tosses the bags out like he's taking out the garbage. Then he heads back inside, and the relevant footage ends a few minutes later, when Duxbury clocks out and walks away from the scene of the crime in plain clothes, thinking he's a free man. But the police, and later viewers, noticed everything. They pointed to the way she climbed the stairs like she was running, to the sound of her calling him nice, to the way Duxbury talked to her, manipulative, rehearsed, a predator testing the perimeter. One person commented that Duxbury had a prior charge of attempted sexual assault. He should have never been in that building, never been in uniform. If a prosecutor had landed a conviction when he was a juvenile, he wouldn't have qualified for the job. But here he was, pressing his luck again, and this time, it worked. People analyzed every frame of his behavior after the murder. How he moved through the garage like nothing happened. How he dumped evidence in plain sight. How casual he looked. One viewer called it, quote, a pep in his step. Another said it was the most horrifying part, that he was still in uniform when he did it, that he had the gall to claim he was off duty. And in a building filled with people, hallways echoing with footsteps at all hours, nobody heard, or if they did, they didn't come. Maybe the noise masked her cries. Maybe people looked the other way. Maybe they just didn't want to get involved. The result is the same either way. A man in uniform and a woman trying to get home. A hallway where one pair of footsteps stopped and another kept going. At first glance, Duxbury's story seemed to check out, but detectives weren't convinced. His odd involvement with Sasha's movements, especially during a time when she was visibly impaired, stood out. Thus, investigators had zeroed in on a suspect. As the only on-duty security guard, his access to both the building and tenants made him the perfect, if not the only, POI candidate. Duxbury then agreed to a polygraph, and at first glance, he was all game. Chatty, eager, relaxed. The kind of demeanor you only see from someone who thinks he's playing the room, not standing inside an interrogation. But beneath the jokes and military anecdotes, the cracks had already started to show. Hour 1 of the interview is a performance. He talks about his shift work, his recent transfer, the glowing emails he's gotten from residents, and how the property manager supposedly loves him to death. He's laying the groundwork, the overworked veteran with a strong work ethic, well-liked, underappreciated, the kind of guy you trust to watch the building, the kind of guy who just got engaged, just found a house, and just wants to be left alone.
I, Stephen Michael Duxbury, acknowledge that I am fully aware of my constitutional right to reverse, and I do hereby request voluntarily, without duress, coercion, threat, promise of reward, or immunity that a polygraph examination, truth verification / lie detector test be administered to me.
The polygrapher walks him through the consent paperwork. Duxbury signs off without hesitation, cracking a joke about stress and how maybe he should have seen a doctor before doing all this. He rattles off his military record, says he was stationed in Afghanistan, and throws in a story about being stabbed by his wife's ex. It's all very casual, but almost too casual for a man under suspicion in a homicide investigation. He volunteers every detail you didn't ask for. Where he lived, what he thinks about New Hampshire locals, how he doesn't drink much anymore. He paints himself as responsible and principled. Never tried drugs, never touched caffeine pills after high school. The kind of guy who drinks Mountain Dew, not beer. He says he's dealt with anxiety since the stabbing, but nothing serious. Says he doesn't really seek treatment, nor does he need it. He's fine.
I honestly couldn't tell you it's been that long. I don't drink to, I don't drink to get that. I don't drink to get that way anymore. Okay. remember the very first time I got really,
I think we all remember that.
yeah, I swore I'd never drink again. I'm sure we've all done that too.
Yeah. It was all underage.
Technically, I was hopping the border to Canada and I was 18, so I was legal in Canada. And they hadn't changed the laws where internal possession was an issue at that point in time. So, and I wasn't driving on the way home, so, yeah.
Caffeine use.
Extensive. I wore a knife.
Okay, so coffee, soda?
Coffee, Mountain Dew, soda, yeah. Okay. I try to stay away from the caffeine pills, though. Those things make me just...
Yeah, you'll just start shaking.
Oh, God. And I remember the very first time I took them, back when I was still in high school, made me really angry for some reason. I guess I don't do all the stimulants on that level.
By the time the conversation circles to Sasha, though, the act slips a little.
When was the last time you saw her? What's her name?
I think, well, I know because I saw the news stuff that it's like Sasha something or other.
Okay, Sasha.
He says he first saw her outside the building, brought back by the two strangers who found her drunk downtown. Said she had no keys, no fob, no ID. Said he couldn't legally let her in. But the truth is, she got in anyway, tailgating behind that other resident. And once she was inside, Duxbury followed. He says it was to keep an eye on her, but that isn't what we see on video.
4 different stairwells in the building.
So you don't know how she got out there, but you were just patrolling and you come across her on the 3rd floor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she's doing that, and it's like, I cannot let someone just hang around in the building, trying, outside their apartment, say if they got locked out, and I didn't know exactly what to do because, she's obviously intoxicated. Completely gone.
He talks about how she tried entering her code at the door. Mentions how she asked to check her car. Midway to the garage, she says never mind, remembers her code. They go back. She keeps trying the lock. He gets frustrated. Says he warned her that he'd call the police if she couldn't get in. Then he claims he left.
Not exactly the smartest, or not the smartest, but the most professional way to be thinking this, but I have to babysit a lot of trucks in that place.
Oh,
and it's just a pain in my ass. So I'm like, okay, look, I'm going to leave you here. Keep trying to, plug away at this. When I come back, if you have not figured this out, we're going to have to do something about this, which is either she's going to have to figure out, somehow get a hold of her friend, or I'm going to be calling the PD and have them deal with it. When I come back around after walking around, she's not there. So I'm like, okay, she must be in the building. She must have gotten in because I checked the building. There was no sign of her.
When he came back later, she was gone. And he just assumed she got inside. Because that's what people do. They disappear and you don't check. He insists he didn't know her. Thought she might be another woman from Unit 320 who'd caused problems before. He admits he was irritated. Says, quote, babysitting drunks, end quote, is just part of the job. Later in the interview, he says he spotted her again, walking with a man.
You thought you saw the same girl? Yeah, I didn't really get a good look at her face, but the height, the hair, and the skin color was about the same thing. Again, like I said, I'd never seen this one before, so...
Not sure it was her, but the hair, the height, the clothing, it matched. She had changed shirts, maybe, but he didn't stop them. She didn't look upset, so he let them go. He says she was wearing white pants and sandals, purple top, flat-footed walk, unstable, hanging onto him for balance. Then, just like that, she was gone.
She was walking, as I call it, flat foot. And she could barely walk. She's stumbling all over the place. At one point, she's kind of hanging onto me, trying to stay on her feet. So, this girl was gone.
He said he didn't check on her apartment, didn't knock, didn't think it was his responsibility. Once someone is inside, he says, they're on their own. Liability, after all. You don't go into apartments alone. You don't risk it. That's his line. But at the end of that shift, he stayed late. He changed his clothes. He took out the trash. Bags he claims to have found on the 2nd floor. Tied white kitchen bags. Tossed in the dumpster. He didn't check where they came from, and he says he didn't check what was inside. The next day, he came back around 9:30 a.m. Police are already on site. He says he figured it was a fender bender. He introduces himself, learns it's a missing persons case, says he doesn't have the ability to open units. He has no keys, no codes. He sticks to the edge of the scene, keeps his distance, says if police needed him, they knew where to find him. And at some point that day, he learns Sasha is dead.
Okay, so you have no idea whether her cause of death is? No. Okay, never overheard anybody say anything about that, or you have any speculation as to how she may have passed? No. Okay.
I mean, other than, like I said, what they told me, as bad as it sounds, I kind of hope it was, she just died of alcohol poisoning, because if not, it's like,
Later, he says he hoped it was alcohol poisoning. Hoped. Those were his words. Then he trails off mid-sentence. Ambiguous. They also asked him about his outfit that morning. Deadpool t-shirt, off-duty clothes. Police told him he could go change. But he didn't. He stuck around. They ask if he knows how the officers got in the apartment. Says no. Maybe they called the condo owner. Maybe the family. Either way, he wasn't involved. He didn't go inside. Instead, he stayed outside like he was told. Watched. Waited. Eventually, the interview winds back to the polygraph itself. The investigator explains how it works, what it measures, the idea of nervousness versus deception, fight, flight, or freeze. He uses a metaphor, seeing a state trooper while you're driving, that instinctive panic, the spike in heart rate, the pulse in your throat. He says that's what they're looking for, those spikes. That's what the machine sees when you're lying. Hour 2 of the polygraph was where the science started to catch up with the story. The examiner explained how the test worked, not as some magical truth machine, but as a way of mapping involuntary reactions, heart rate, breathing, sweat. He walked Stephen through the sensors and what they would do, how they'd record any stress spikes that didn't match up with the answers he was giving. The goal was transparency, but more importantly, consistency.
You ready to do this number test here?
yes.
All right, perfect.
They started with a practice run, a simple numbers test where Stephen was asked to lie on purpose, just to see how deception would register. From there, the questions turned darker. Was Sasha poisoned? Was she physically assaulted? Did he know what happened to her?
The first kind of test we're going to do is, it's kind of like a weird test. It's called, it's basically to find out if you have any knowledge as to how Sasha ended up being deceased.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you very specific questions.
Okay.
All right? So just like we went over the numbers question, I'm going to go over the questions before the test, okay?
Okay.
These are going to be very simple and straight to the point.
Okay.
It's going to, basically this is how it's going to go. Do you know if Sasha was poisoned?
Do you want me to answer these now?
No. Was she shot with a .22?
No.
Was she stabbed?
No.
Was she choked?
No.
Was she shot with a .38?
No.
Was she hit with a hammer?
No.
Was she hit with a chair?
No.
Okay. Plain and simple.
Okay.
All right?
That's good.
Each time, Duxbury denied any involvement whatsoever. And each time, the equipment logged a heart rate climbing too high to ignore. He brushed it off, citing a pre-existing medical condition. The test rolled on though, digging into his personal history, childhood trauma, medical background. All the while, control questions were used to establish his physiological baseline. To the naked eye, he looked steady. But the numbers said otherwise.
Well, you know what? You can't be everywhere at once. Let's even look at it. We're being very specific here. All right? I'm sorry. It's okay. I get it. But it's very important for you to focus on the task at hand, okay?
Yes.
I'm asking you very specifically if you know something.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't.
And so As I'm asking you,
Mhm. Yeah, don't think just, yes, sir.
yep, and answer honestly.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
That's the important thing.
By the third hour, the rhythm changed. The examiner began cycling the same core questions back again, watching for any little deviation. Then he shifted into small talk. Math problems, printer paper, school budgets, whatever would put Duxbury at ease. They reviewed the test results together. On the screen, the charts didn't lie. The data showed significant stress responses anytime Sasha's name was mentioned.
What's that say?
Significant reactions. Probably this result was produced by a truthful person.
0.003% chance that the result was produced by a truthful person.
Damn.
0.003% chance that you were truthful on this test today. And that, what it does is it scores all three charts, okay?
Yeah.
And it does all its little algorithm stuff. You're into that kind of stuff, so see all these minus threes? I mean, it's basically almost identical to my scoring.
The examiner explained how the system worked. If you're telling the truth, those lines should be flat. But every time the question circled Sasha's death, whether he knew who killed her, whether he entered her apartment, whether he moved anything, his vitals spiked like clockwork.
I can only help you so much.
Okay, no, I understand. I mean, you've been very helpful explaining these things to me as it is.
I mean, it is what it is. It's, you know, this is the report that detectives are going to get.
Eventually, the examiner said it outright. He failed. The margin wasn't close. The computer flagged a 99.7% probability of deception. Stephen tried to talk his way around it, but the examiner kept pushing. Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe something got out of hand. But this did not look like the truth. They brought up his job, his duty, his role as a security guard. And again, Duxbury pushed back. He said the situation disturbed him, that he hated being accused, that the guilt wasn't his. By hour 4, the tone was different. Less explanation, more confrontation. Detectives now sat across from Duxbury, pointing out inconsistencies that had piled up across 4 hours of tape. He'd said he went home after his shift, but now admitted he came back inside to retrieve belongings, a detail he conveniently forgot. He had downplayed his contact with Sasha, but footage showed him walking with her, talking to her, even briefly following her. At one point, she was literally running away. When confronted, Stephen called it a mistake, said it was, quote, stupid to leave her alone, that he didn't enter her apartment, and that he didn't mean any harm.
Do you understand that?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and yeah, I agree. That was a stupid thing for me to do, was to leave her alone.
It's on video where you're chasing her at one point.
That's because she thought she'd be funny and started running off.
Well, that's my question. If it's not that big of a deal,
I've had this happen before. Again, this is not something that's completely out of the norm for me to deal with drunken people doing stupid shit.
But the detectives weren't just asking why he didn't help. They were asking why he didn't call anyone. Why, if this girl was so intoxicated, he didn't check on her. Why his story didn't match the video. Why none of it lined up. They keep things measured, calm, almost sympathetic. Told him they didn't think he was a bad guy. That sometimes temptation wins, that accidents happen, that mistakes don't have to define you. The good old good cop routine.
I don't think you're a monster. I don't think you're a bad guy at all. I think you're an honorable man. The temptation sometimes, man. Holy shit. She was a pretty girl.
But Stephen wasn't budging. He started pushing back, said he was uncomfortable, that he regretted doing the test at all, that this whole thing had been too much. He insisted again and again and again that he did not kill her. When pressed again about his actions that night, like why he followed Sasha and then just left her slumped outside her apartment, he didn't deny it. Not really.
I'm sorry that some of my stuff has been kind of spotty. I'm sorry I may have forgotten some key details or even minor details that look really bad when they're not told. But I have told you everything. I've been more than cooperative.
He admitted it was a stupid thing to do, but only after being boxed in. The way he phrased it, casual, detached, sounded less like regret and more like damage control. A way to downplay neglect that, in hindsight, looked like premeditation. Then came the big lie.
That you did go inside. Now you made out of her.
I did not go inside of her apartment.
There's a lot of physical evidence.
Even after she invited you in.
She didn't invite me into her apartment.
He didn't enter Sasha's apartment, or that's what he said. Clear, firm, unequivocal. And it was false. Thumbprints and DNA would later prove otherwise. He'd been in that room. And when he said he wasn't, oh, he knew it. There were other tells too. Little contradictions that began to snowball. Why didn't he make sure she got inside? Why didn't he check on her later? He said he figured she wouldn't move from that spot. Like that made it okay. Like leaving an impaired woman on the floor was just another Friday night on patrol. The investigators started to push back. One of them said,
We looked at certain things match up, and there's holes in your statements. Every time we talk to you, there's more and more that comes out.
And Duxbury, still clinging to his performance, replied,
I am telling you the truth.
This will bother you. This will eat at you.
His tone cracked. His energy shifted. That calm, confident, cool exterior finally started to slip. Then came a moment of real panic when he realized those cameras had audio.
Because there's audio. I'm partially aware you have audio along with video.
Actually, I didn't know that.
You
No, I didn't know that the things were actually did audio until the property manager had actually showed myself and my supervisor.
He was caught and scrambling. That audio, remember, captured Sasha telling him he was nice. Captured her confusion, her fear, her final moments. He made a show of taking out trash after his shift. Said he found it on the second floor and threw it out on his own time. 3 bags, tied off, discarded. It seemed like a detail, until you remember what was inside of them. Over and over, he continued to contradict himself. Claimed again he never went inside, then admitted to following her for nearly 40 minutes. Escorted her to the garage, came back, left again, came back again. His story turned into all loose ends and half-truths, tied together with just enough confidence to pass for sincerity, until the evidence ripped it apart.
I mean, I even told you yesterday that I wasn't familiar, and I'm not kind of nervous about these things. I still came in today.
You did.
Now I'm looking at this. Now I'm seeing this as a mistake to come in for this, because now it just makes it look like I did something, because obviously I'm bothered by the situation. There was a dead person that I saw in the building I'm responsible for the security of.
By the time the polygraph was over, Stephen Duxbury had buried himself in a hole so deep that even the examiners had trouble keeping a straight face. And not because of the results, those were damning enough, but because of the way he talked, the way he explained, the way every single question turned into a monologue about family medical history, Afghanistan, or completely unrelated topics like why Florida pharmacies weren't worth his time. Stephen Duxbury failed the polygraph, spectacularly. The data showed it, the charts confirmed it, and the examiner spelled it out for him clear as day. But Stephen still didn't panic. He pivoted, said his heart raced when he was tired, that heart disease ran in his genes, that he'd been stressed, hungry, distracted. Whatever it took to explain away what the machine had just laid bare. It was classic deflection, and he leaned into it hard. Viewers saw through it instantly. The way he talked, the way he danced around every question, it set off alarm bells. One person put it best. Quote, "The first question should have been, When was the last time you didn't spend an hour explaining your answer? Unquote. Others compared him to known manipulators like Jeremy DeWitt. That same smug energy, that same need to control the room. Someone else said, quote, anytime a person is too friendly or chatty, that's a red flag, end quote. Another just called him what he was, quote, this is the guy you peer out your windows to avoid, unquote. The polygraph itself became a running joke. Some viewers theorized that had he been asked about the color of his hair, he would have gone on to a long diatribe about the Big Bang. Another viewer joked that getting him to talk wasn't the problem. Getting him to shut up was. But beneath the sarcasm, there was anger. Anger that this man was supposed to protect tenants. Anger that other women had reportedly complained about him before, and no one listened. Anger that he described past violent behavior so casually, like this was just another day in his life. But viewers also took the time to praise the examiner. The quiet way he let Duxbury self-destruct. The subtle glances to the camera. One person said it flat out. Quote, this dude knew early on he was in the presence of evil, end quote. There were jokes, there were memes, but there was also this. Quote, her murder was a guy paid to protect her, end quote. That was the part no one could shake. Sasha Samsudean didn't let a stranger into her apartment. She was killed by the man in uniform who claimed he was just doing his job. From the start, the evidence against Stephen Duxbury wasn't just circumstantial, it was personal. Detectives got a court order for his DNA and fingerprints, and the results sealed it. Easily. His DNA matched the sample recovered from Sasha's body. His thumbprint, found on the toilet seat inside her apartment. A place he swore he never entered. A detail he could never explain. Then came the bombshell. A digital footprint. Police found the Google search on Duxbury's phone. How to override an electronic keypad lock. The same kind Sasha had on her door. That search was made around 5 in the morning, when the security footage just so happened to go dark. Whatever doubt might have existed about his involvement started collapsing right there. Still, investigators didn't jump the gun. They did their due diligence. They looked into Sasha's ex-boyfriend, tracked down the man named in her final text, collected DNA from both, but neither matched. And when they went back through the surveillance one more time, they noticed something else. Something that didn't line up. Duxbury's shift ended at 6 a.m., but there he was, still on camera at 6:36, hauling 2 trash bags out of the building. Clear plastic. Just like the kind Sasha kept in stock inside her unit. Those bags never got searched, but the implication was obvious. He hadn't just followed her. He hadn't just watched her. He had cleaned up using her own supplies. With DNA, digital evidence, surveillance, and a glaring trail of lies, Orlando police arrested Stephen Duxbury for the rape, murder, and burglary of Sasha Samsudean. He continued to deny it, claimed he wasn't even involved, said someone else had chased her and that maybe police were looking for the wrong guy. But that trail he left behind told a completely different story. 2 years later, in November 2017, it all went to trial. But it took the jury just 7 days and only 4 hours of deliberation to come back with a guilty verdict. Duxbury was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted sexual battery with physical force, and burglary with assault or battery. Everything prosecutors alleged, the jury confirmed. At trial, the state laid out a grim and methodical timeline. Sasha, impaired and vulnerable, returned to her building. She struggled to find her way home. She was followed, well stalked, by a man who was supposed to keep her safe. Then she vanished behind the door no one else had the code to. Inside that apartment, she was strangled. Her body was found wrapped in a comforter, cleaned with bleach. A security guard turned predator, now caught by the very cameras meant to protect the building. The DNA evidence alone was devastating. A forensic expert testified that Duxbury's DNA was found on Sasha's breasts, with the probability of a random match calculated in the range of trillions to 1. Not millions, not billions, trillions to 1. When pressed by the defense, the expert shot down the idea of innocent transfer. There was no scenario in the entire universe where that evidence got there by accident. Duxbury didn't testify. His defense team didn't call any witnesses. Instead, they leaned into the oldest play in the book, sowed doubt. Maybe the investigation missed something. Maybe the killer got away. Maybe the police jumped to conclusions. But the prosecution, well, they had their receipts. From digital data to physical prints, from footage to phone history, every piece led squarely back to him. After the verdict, Sasha's family addressed the court in an emotional sentencing hearing. Her mother spoke about their final dinner together. Her father broke down, recalling all the memories they'd never get to make. Duxbury? He didn't say a word. Then, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. 2 years later, Stephen appealed, claimed his statements should have been thrown out, that there wasn't enough evidence for the sexual battery charge. But the appellate court, they weren't buying it. On the first point, Duxbury argued that he only spoke to police because he was afraid of losing his job. He cited Garrity versus New Jersey, a case about public employees being coerced into talking under the threat of termination. But the court shut that down fast. You see, Duxbury worked private security. Keyword private. No one threatened to fire him. The law he cited didn't apply. His Miranda waiver stood. On the second point, lack of evidence, the court was even more direct. The victim's injuries, the DNA, the state of her body, and the complete lack of clothing all pointed to an attempted sexual battery. There was no alternative explanation that held up. Duxbury had offered two, that it never happened, or that it was consensual. But he also told police he never even entered the apartment. And Sasha, with the blood alcohol content of 0.239, couldn't have legally consented anyway. The jury had more than enough to convict. The appellate court denied both motions. No suppression, no reversal. His conviction and sentence were affirmed in full. Stephen Duxbury, a man trusted to patrol the halls of a secure building, misused that trust to follow, isolate, and murder a defenseless woman. And for that, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Sasha Samsudean was just 27 years old when her life was taken. Young, vibrant, and full of promise. She was memorable too, the kind of person who took care of others without being asked. The kind of woman who made you feel like you mattered. That's who the world lost. Not just a victim, not just a headline, but a daughter, a friend, and a force. The footprints her killer left behind tell the story of a predator, but the footprints Sasha left behind, those footprints, though quieter, will forever mean more.